The Crying Curtain. This is a true story my cousin in London swore to me, and I later found a thread on a UK forum describing the same sound in the same street. I stayed in his flat during a rainy February, the kind of damp that clings to glass, the kind of cold that turns breath into a slow ghost. The living room had tall windows and a single gray curtain, heavy with dust, stitched along the edge with a faint silver thread. The first night, just after 2 a.m., I heard a wet, quiet sound like fabric sobbing into its own folds. I thought it was the pipes or the wind pressing drops through the sash, but the window was dry and the curtain was not moving. The sound came in breaths, a held inhale, a weak exhale, as if someone was crying into thick cloth to hide. I stood there with my phone light, the beam making rain stars on the glass, and the sobbing stopped the instant the light touched the hem. When I turned the light away, it began again, closer, the wet cloth voice finding my name the way a whisper finds a seam. I called my cousin, and he answered on the third ring, whispering not to open the curtain, not at night, not after what the last tenant did. He told me a woman had lived there with her newborn, that neighbors heard lullabies through the wall, that one winter she tied the curtain as a cradle. It sounded like a rumor, cruel and simple, but I felt a knot against my knuckles, where the tie-back rope had worn the fabric coarse. I stepped backward until my calf met the sofa, the crying thinned to a thread, then nodded into silence. At 3:11 a.m., a cold drip touched my wrist, though the window frame was dry, though the plaster was intact. The drip left a snail trail salty on my skin, the taste of a human tear without warmth. I slept with the bedroom door shut and a towel shoved under it, the city sirens passing like red comets down the street. Morning brought ordinary sounds, buses coughing, pigeons stamping, but the curtain's hem had a darker band, as if it had been crying all night. I ironed coffee into courage and wrote off the night as Old House Theater, until I found the wall behind the curtain faintly imprinted. It was a smear the size of a small face, round, pressed, an oval of pressure that never quite dried. That evening it started earlier, just after midnight, the sob rising like steam and then breaking, a lullaby turned inward and strangled. I spoke to it, ridiculous as that felt, told it I was there, told it I would not look if it didn't want me to. The crying shifted, not louder but nearer, a traveler reaching a final station and realizing no one is waiting on the platform. I asked what it needed, what it was, and the curtain settled, the silver thread catching the streetlight in a line that trembled. Somewhere below, a fox barked, the kind of bark that snaps a city back into its old animal shape. I took the tie back and let the weight of the cloth fall, just enough to loosen its throat, just enough to let air through. The sobs flattened into a shallow breath, then a sound like fabric smoothing, then a tiny click, like a clasp being undone. At 1:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with the forum link my cousin sent, posts about the weeping drape on our block, dates going back years. All the posts mentioned silver thread, the same stitch, the same hour, the same cold drip that tasted like the end of a story. On the third night, I placed a bowl under the hem, not for water, but for whatever those breaths carried. The bowl fogged with a fine salt, a faint cloudy crescent, like powdered glass, like crystallized breath. I whispered that I would open the window a little, that the air would move, that the room would not choke her. The crying thinned, the hem lifted without wind, and the wall imprint lightened to the soft blur of a thumbprint wiped away. At dawn, the curtain hung dead quiet, the silver thread dull and ordinary, the room smelling of cold cotton and rain. I kept the tie back loose after that, and the sobbing never returned, only the occasional sigh, like a house deciding to live. Some nights when the city sleeps wrong, I still taste salt on my wrist, and the bowl on my shelf clouds over for no reason, as if the curtain remembers the shape of a face. The red earphones. This happened to me in a Boston dorm, and years later I read a Reddit post from a girl in Dublin describing the same red earbuds in the same last track. I bought the earphones secondhand, a bright candy red, the case dented, the cable warm as if it had sat in someone's palm too long. They sounded fine in daylight, big city noise sealed out, footsteps made private, the world edited to music and breath. At night, the left bud whispered a hiss under every song, a breath riding the bass like someone sharing headphones with me in the dark. I cleaned the mesh, checked the jack, but the hiss stayed thin and human like a secret stuck between teeth. When I paused, the hiss kept going, 2 beats more, a stitched echo that shouldn't have survived a stop. On the third night, the player listed a track I hadn't downloaded, voicemail 004, 37 seconds long. I tapped play and heard stares, the rubbery slap of shoes, then a laugh that started friendly and fell down a hole. There was a woman's voice, breathless, saying, "I made it to the bridge," and then the wind took her vowels apart. The file ended with 3 pops, the kind cheap mics make when they knock against zipper teeth. I asked the seller if the earphones were returned by anyone, and he replied, "They were unclaimed from a campus box, red, right?" I checked local news archives and found a short piece about a missing grad student last pinged near the river bridge, red accessories noted. The next night, voicemail 003 appeared, then 002 populating backward like footsteps rewinding up a stairwell. I played 002 and got pure wind, then the word almost, then what sounded like the squeak of a rail under cold. By the time 001 appeared, I wore both buds, though the hiss had turned into a breath at my cheek. The first file was a library whisper, the tiny tap of keys, then a murmured apology, then the word listen. I said, "I'm listening," and the pause felt like a person realizing they hadn't been heard for a long time. The player displayed a new folder called Return, and inside was a single contact, the missing girl's initials. I called the number and it rang into silence, then clicked, then delivered a soft rush of wind as if the phone were still moving. I asked stupidly what she wanted me to do, and the left bud vibrated against my ear, a tiny nod made of plastic. The map app opened itself to the bridge, blue line across black water, a nighttime artery. I walked there under sodium light, cars ripping the air, my breath wired into a stranger's last route. The buds tugged when I neared the middle span, the cable drawing a faint, insistent letter against my collarbone, a crooked R. At the railing I saw it, wedged where the bolts made a hard pocket, the red earphone case's missing piece, a snapped corner with 2 initials scored. I reached through cold metal and cut my knuckle, a small, bright hurt that made the night sharper. Inside the snapped corner was a micro SD, nothing labeled, just a black chip the size of a fingernail. Back in my room, I slotted it into my laptop and found voice memos, numbered dates matching the news piece. The last memo ended at 23 seconds with a sudden quiet, then a final breath that wasn't hers. I sent the files to campus security under a burner email, attached the location, wrote 2 sentences, hit send, and waited. In the morning, the player app showed update complete, and the red earbuds lost their hiss entirely, like a room that has been told a secret and forgiven it. Weeks later, a notice went up that personal effects were returned to family, no details, just bureaucratic mercy in black serif font. Sometimes when I coil the cable, it loops itself into a tiny R again, then loosens, as if it still practices her name in the dark. The vanished family photo. This story came from my grandmother in Marseille, and from a French Facebook group that shared the same pattern, the same missing faces. In her hallway hung a black and white portrait, the whole family in Sunday clothes, a harbor sky behind them like chalk. Over the years, the print softened, silvering at the edges, but everyone remained recognizably alive in their frozen minute. One winter, my grandmother noticed that our uncle's face was softer, not blurred by age, but thinned like fog over glass. By New Year's, his cheekbone had turned to paper light, his eye a smudge the size of a thumb, as if someone had erased him with patience. He died that February in a car accident, the same winter the photograph swallowed his features. The family covered the frame with a black ribbon, the way old houses dress their mirrors, and prayers were said in a language that survives storms. Months later, my mother's sister began to fade in the picture, only at night, returning by noon, like the moon peeking through a morning window. We tried different walls, different glass, but when the hallway clock hit midnight, a face thinned, grain by grain, as if breath could erode silver. I took the photo to a conservator who said it was a silver gelatin print, delicate, reactive, alive the way metals are alive. He found no chemical leak, no fungus script, no water memory in the paper, and yet the vanishing continued. When my aunt fell sick, the photo warned us first, subtracting her eyes to a pale suggestion, a suggestion that haunted the medicine cabinet. We begged the house to stop, foolish and earnest, like children bargaining with the sea. I tried to digitize it, but the scanner froze at 99%, and the preview showed the same thinning pixels behaving like silver. On a forum, others posted their haunted portraits, their fading weddings, their group photos that refused to hold the living. They agreed on only one rule: do not hang the picture opposite a door that opens to night air. Ours was opposite the front door, and the Mistral loves old streets that aim like crossbows into the dark. We turned the frame to face the wall, thought we could starve it of faces, starve it of the moon that kept measuring us. The back of the frame bloomed with fingerprints that didn't match ours, small, close together, as if a child stood behind the wood. I lifted the backing board and found, tucked between felt and fiber, a second photo of the same day, but empty of people. The harbor, the bench, the sky, but no family, as if the camera had blinked and kept only the place that would outlive us. The two prints touched, paste and paper sharing a slow secret, one learning to be empty, the other learning to forget. We separated them with archival tissue, gave them space like quarreling relatives at a wake. For a month, no faces thinned, and we carried on as if we had tricked a river into flowing uphill. Then a cousin's smile dulled a shade, and with it her pulse in real life stumbled, a faint that left the kitchen colder. I realized the photo did not curse, it counted, it tallied breaths, it made room for what the house already knew. On my last night before moving, I sat with the frame on my knees and asked it to take me instead of the next name it practiced. At midnight, the glass cooled, the breath on it wrote a curve, then another, forming letters in a language no one had time to learn. I pressed my thumb to the fog and felt the slightest push back, like a button under velvet. When the wind rattled at the door, the letters cleared and the faces held, everyone present, stubborn, alive. In the morning, I sealed the picture with new glass and hung it in a room without a door to the night, a small act of mercy. The frame still hums in winter like a throat deciding to sing, but the faces have stayed, and the harbor sky watches us without eating. If you were in that room, would you loosen the curtain or tie it tighter? And do you believe fabric can remember a face? Would you play a stranger's last voicemail if it meant walking to a bridge? And would you go alone? If a family photo began to subtract you at midnight, would you turn it to the wall or ask it what debt you owed? Tell me what part haunted you most, and whether you've ever heard a house breathe when it thought you were asleep. If these stories followed you into the dark, leave a comment so I know whose footsteps I hear. Subscribe for more True Night stories every week, and join me where the light ends and the whisper starts. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next midnight.